The air in Dongcheng was always thick with the promise of rain and the reality of stale oil. I let them take me in the early hours of a Thursday, 3:17 local time, precisely when the MSS shift change made the tactical response team marginally sloppy. This wasn't capture, it was infiltration by appointment. The location was a repurposed cold storage facility, masquerading as the Great Harmony Noodle Emporium, 5 subterranean levels deep. My target wasn't a person, but 0.7 grams of highly volatile data. Our cryptographer, code name Nightingale, had managed to ingest the physical microkey to the Dragon's Breath network right before Colonel Gao's interrogation team broke his cover. Gao, a man whose patience was infinite and whose cruelty was surgical, preferred breaking minds before he broke bones. I needed to be inside before Nightingale's metabolism could render the data unrecoverable. As the black van doors slammed shut, crushing the last vestiges of street noise, I initiated my capture protocol. Passive resistance, high compliance, zero eye contact. The cell they threw me into, C14, designed for sensory monotony, smelled overwhelmingly of ozone and industrial cleaner. It had solid steel walls, an observation slit too high to see through, and a single, bolted-down commode. The clock started ticking not when the door locked, but when my body temperature stabilized against the cold steel of the floor, signaling the beginning of my 90-second window setup. I had exactly 12 hours to map the audible frequencies of the ventilation system and find the single structural flaw that would become my egress. Colonel Gao himself did not arrive for the first 8 hours. They employed the soft interrogation method, perfectly calibrated discomfort designed to dismantle cognitive resistance without leaving a mark. They cycled white noise with sudden bursts of classical Chinese opera, regulated the temperature within a 2-degree band of hypothermia, and bombarded the cell with specific light wavelengths, mimicking perpetual twilight. I used the monotony. The ventilation system, an ancient carrier unit, cycled every 45 minutes, creating a specific, momentary drop in ambient hum. I timed my heart rate to the sound of the pipes, using the sonic profile to locate the old, disused air circulation shaft. It ran directly behind the commode wall. This was my path. The essential element was already on my person, a specialized diamond filament sewing needle, less than a centimeter long, disguised within the reinforced stitching of my jacket lining. The needle was coated in a neurostimulant compound, a highly localized histamine booster that would, upon application, mimic a rapid-onset hypertensive crisis. This was phase 1, creating the mandatory medical distraction. I couldn't just cut the lock. I had to force an opening using MSS standard operating procedures against them. I needed a medic, a momentary breach of protocol, and crucially, less than 30 seconds of unsecured proximity to my wrist. The entire sequence was calculated to take 3 minutes and 40 seconds, culminating in the initiation of the 90-second escape window. I initiated the crisis precisely during the 3rd ventilation cycle of the standard patrol schedule, 1822 local time. The neurostimulant, delivered via a microscopic scratch on the radial artery of my wrist, a movement disguised as an absent-minded itch, worked instantly. My heart rate spiked, blood pressure soared, and my skin mottled violently. I pressed the emergency call button and collapsed, feigning acute respiratory distress. The subsequent rush was chaotic by MSS standards, meaning one primary guard and a certified trauma medic arrived in precisely 58 seconds. The medic's kit was a standardized issue aluminum case. As the medic focused on restraining my violent tremors and prepping a sedative injection, I executed the retrieval. The diamond filament was secured within a microclip inside my collar. Using the sudden, involuntary spasm of my left hand, a known side effect of the stimulant, I snagged the clip and transferred the filament, concealing it beneath the sleeve cuff. The true goal of the medical intervention wasn't sedation. It was access. While they were checking my vitals, I managed to scrape a trace amount of carbon dust from the electrode pads and mix it with my saliva, the necessary conductive paste for the next stage. As the sedative hit my bloodstream, slowing my tremors, I had what I needed. Phase 2 was now active, preparing the lock breech from the inside, silent and non-electronic. With the sedative taking hold, I entered a state of enforced calm, which I utilized for the final blueprint rehearsal. The 90 seconds had to be subdivided precisely. Exit C, 14. 15 seconds. Corridor sprint, 20 meters, through the blind spot, 10 seconds. Biometric lock bypass, door B, 9-12 seconds. Entry and extraction from Nightingale's cell, D, 130 seconds. Accessing and disabling the ventilation plenum grate, 15 seconds. Total time remaining for error correction and initial descent, 8 seconds. The biometric lock on B9 was the major choke point. It operated on a constant pressure sensor combined with retinal scan, but the cleaning crew's supervisor, a highly overworked woman named Foam, had a chronic habit of resting her hand on the sensor while entering the code, creating a faint pressure differential. Weeks before my capture, our external team had used a polymer transfer gel to capture that exact microimpression. I had a tiny, polymerized wafer hidden in my molar filling. The camera preceding B9 was unreliable. It was known to flicker during peak power load, 23 to 1 o'clock, due to a poorly shielded overhead service light. My escape window was timed for 23:45. Every second was accounted for, every motion minimized. Failure meant execution. Success meant confirming the most critical intelligence operation of the decade. The paranoia was no longer external. It was structural, built into the rigidity of their security framework. At 23:43, the overhead light began its predicted flicker, a rhythmic, almost subsonic pulse. 2 minutes later, I initiated the breach. I used the diamond filament, guided by the conductive paste of carbon and saliva, to cut not the magnetic lock core, but the external casing surrounding the proximity sensor. Cutting the casing delayed the inevitable alarm by severing the immediate power feedback loop. I then turned to the commode. The cold water pipe fittings were made of a high brass alloy. I snapped off a tiny, disposable segment and used it as a momentary conductive bridge, shorting the proximity sensor just long enough to signal an open state to the main cell door controller. The resulting electrical smell was masked by the ventilation intake. The lock solenoid retracted with a muted, mechanical thunk dash. T equals 90 seconds. I slipped out, pausing just long enough to push the heavy steel door back into its frame without engaging the latch. The silence of the corridor was deafening. My boots were wrapped in specialized acoustic dampening cloth, moving almost frictionless over the polished concrete. The first 15 seconds were perfect, blending into the shadows cast by the flickering lamp. T equals 75 seconds. I reached door B9, the biometric choke point. I applied the pressure-sensitive polymer wafer to the entry panel, simulating Supervisor Feng's hand placement. The light blinked green for confirmation. As the heavy door began its slow hydraulic retraction, I heard the faint, telltale squeak of rubber soles rounding the far corner. A security guard, alerted not by an alarm, but by the marginal drop in sensor pressure I had created earlier. I pressed myself against the wall, flattening into the shallow recess where the fire suppression lines ran. The guard passed, focused on the disturbance down the main corridor, oblivious to the fact that the door immediately behind him had just been successfully bypassed. I slipped through the gap, my heart hammering against my ribs, a physical manifestation of the dwindling time. I moved into the secondary corridor, which led straight to D1, Nightingale's cell. I had saved 3 seconds on the biometric bypass, critical margin for the next phase, which was the most dangerous. I was now in the interrogation wing, where acoustic monitors were extremely sensitive. T equals 45 seconds. Nightingale's chamber. D1 was far less reinforced than my holding cell, designed for short-term chemical detention. He was strapped down, unconscious, his breathing shallow and rattling. I bypassed the standard magnetic lock using a miniature electromagnetic pulse generator, a single, silent burst, which momentarily froze the solenoid without triggering the high-voltage tamper warning. I had exactly 30 seconds inside. Nightingale had been subjected to heavy doses of thiopental sodium. His body was shutting down. I didn't have time for surgery, only retrieval. I quickly retrieved a specialized retrieval kit from a microcompartment hidden beneath the room's ventilation intake grate, a pre-planted cache from our asset team 6 weeks prior. The kit contained a sterile, swallowed pill-sized magnetic retriever attached to a fiber optic thread. I administered a rapid-acting saline flush, waited 5 agonizing seconds, and carefully guided the magnetic pill into position. The clock was burning. I felt the resistance, the slight pull, and then confirmation. The dense, high-grade ruthenium microkey, no larger than a grain of rice, was secured. I pulled it back, transferring it immediately into a small, watertight capsule I stored in my cuff. T equals 15 seconds. T equals 15 seconds. The primary lockdown sequence initiated with a deafening, multi-toned klaxon. The facility was now sealed. I sprinted toward the ventilation plenum access point, located at the end of the interrogation wing, disguised behind a utility panel. I used a highly specialized, plastic explosive charge, inert to thermal sensors and designed for minimal acoustic output, to shear the 6 industrial-grade bolts holding the heavy access grate. The sound was a sharp, hydraulic hiss, swallowed instantly by the roaring klaxon. The grate swung open, revealing the massive, black maw of the main exhaust plenum. I dropped the sealed capsule containing the key, attached to a 100-meter spool of reinforced Kevlar fiber optic wire, into the plenum's vertical drop shaft. I followed immediately, squeezing into the tight cavity. Below me was 5 stories of abandoned cold storage levels. The sound of heavy boots slamming against the concrete corridor was less than 10 meters away. Colonel Gao's voice, amplified and distorted by the facility-wide intercom, screamed for lockdown confirmation. He knew I was in the facility, and he knew exactly where I was headed. The vertical descent was hellish, scraping metal and absolute darkness. T equals 10 seconds. I heard the searchlights sweep the floor above me. The guards were at the access panel, firing shots into the darkness of the shaft, hoping for a random hit. The design of the black site worked against them now. The lowest 2 levels were reserved for industrial refrigeration, creating a severe, sudden temperature gradient. I was plummeting into sub-zero air, which instantly disrupted their thermal imaging capabilities, turning me into a confusing thermal blur against the mass of cold metal. I used the Kevlar wire not just to track the capsule, but as a brake line, slowing my freefall. The fiber optic spool ran into an ancient and used drainage channel that terminated outside the facility perimeter, pre-rigged for remote retrieval. The friction on the cable burned my hands through the gloves, but I couldn't slow down. I was now on level 5, the maintenance basement, where the air was thick with mildew and stagnant water. I had to reach the maintenance drain before the MSS could triangulate my exit point using seismic sensors. T equals 5 seconds. I saw the dim light of the ancient drainage tunnel ahead. T equals 2 seconds. I hit the bottom of the shaft and rolled into the drainage channel, the water instantly soaking my clothing. My ears were ringing from the proximity of the explosive charge and the continuous shriek of the alarm. I pulled the fiber optic thread one last time, ensuring the capsule had fully entered the drainage outflow pipe leading toward the external reservoir. I didn't wait to confirm the external team's retrieval. My mission was internal extraction, not external exfiltration. I crawled the final 30 meters through the pipe, emerging not into a field, but into the loud, chaotic underside of a massive municipal thoroughfare, a storm drain outlet hidden beneath a 6-lane interchange. The escape time from cell breach to perimeter exit, 88 seconds. I pulled the small emergency beacon from my pocket and activated the silent pulse, confirming the capsule's location. As I melted into the crowd of morning commuters, smelling of ozone, carbon dust, and sewage, the distant wail of police sirens confirmed Colonel Gao's discovery. The Dragon's Breath key was secured. I was just another ghost in the city, but the ghost was free, and the Ministry had lost the game by exactly 2 seconds.